Well, hello everybody. Nick McGinnis here with the Meadow Green Farm, and we're almost to the end of October. Earlier on in the season, at the start of the grazing season in May, I did a video on drought preparedness, and perhaps that was kind of ironic in how things turned out this season, because it ended up being one of the wettest summers and so far one of the wettest falls in 20 or 30 years in our region of the world. But all that to say, when we began the grazing season in mid-May and almost into the end of June, we were very much planning for a really dry season. We were actually anticipating a drought. We had a drought the year before, kind of a minimal, but a drought nonetheless the year before that. So things were quite dry, the streams were dry, and we were probably overstocked a little bit too, considering the severity of the drought the year before. So this year we began by employing a strategy whereby we were going to move the cattle as quickly as possible around the entire farm on that first pass, so that we could leave as much residue, or basically we just leave as much grass behind as possible. We may have only been grazing, I would hope, I aim to graze about 30% of the forage on that first pass. And a lot of people would have seen what we left behind and would have thought, wow, what a waste of grass. Look at all that extra grass you left behind. But you have to keep in mind that when you're doing rotational grazing, you graze a spot, you leave it, but then you're ultimately going to come back to it. So on this particular field, this is at the far end of our farm. We grazed this for the first time, I think, on, let's see, it was well into July, let's say July 20th. And then we grazed it around August 25th. And now we're on October 24th. And we're on our third pass. And let's just see here. There's a lot of grass here. And some of it's dry, some of it's still green. But guess what? The hay in your barn is dry too. So it's not necessarily going to have no nutritional value. It's not going to have as much as fresh grass, but it's still going to be something they can eat. And I was at a pasture walk about 3 years ago, put on by the Nova Scotia Department of Agriculture, and they talked about this. And stockpiled forage, once it loses its green color and it becomes, kind of in that dead stage, looks much like hay. It has about 75 to 80% of the nutritional value. Now that may vary depending on the species, but overall, about 75% of the nutritional value in this dried stockpile forage that's left on the fields versus hay. And some people may hear that and say, well, I'm overwintering cattle, I want to give them the very best nutrition there is. My argument against that would be, if it's 80% of the nutritional value, just feed them 20% more and they're going to get those nutrients. Incorporate some minerals into your program and a salt lick, and you're probably going to be fine. And in my opinion, on my own herd, if a cattle can't sustain itself, maintain good body condition, well, it's not going to work in my type of system. So I'll either cull it or I'll sell it. It's not something I want to keep in my breeding program. And ultimately, that's how this whole thing kind of goes around in full circle. You have to have the management process right, and then in terms of your grazing schedule and your grazing management, but you also have to align your herd genetics with that type of program that you're running. So I don't claim to be running any type of large beef herd where I'm trying to produce the biggest calves and the biggest steers. I'm trying to produce low-cost beef that still maintains high quality, selling it as a grass-fed beef product, and I'm doing it all without a whole lot of overhead. These cattle don't go in barns, they don't get fed grain, they're outside 24/7, 365 days a year. I have a corral with a holding pen that's got a 6-foot high solid wall built. That's a nice wind block. I have a few patches of pasture that have incorporated some surrounding spruce trees into that pasture to provide protection from the elements during the harshest of winters. So that's just a few of the things that I'm doing here, some of the thought processes behind it, and I'll just finish with a quick look at some of the cattle and how they're maintaining.